Hello there and welcome to the Media Coach video tip. Hope you're okay. So once again, I'm going to be presenting a three-part tip. I'm going to be giving you a book to read, a speech to look at, and a tip to improve your speaking. And today's book is this one. It's called Lend Me Your Ears by Professor Max Atkinson. Now, Max has written some brilliant stuff on speaking. I've interviewed Max as well on my show. Charming and wonderful man, and knows a huge amount about public speaking. And this little book here, it's not that little, is it? But it's a book called Lend Me Your Ears, and it talks about the essential elements of public speaking. There's some brilliant advice in there. And if you don't have any other books about public speaking, that's one you should certainly consider getting hold of. In fact, it should be on your shelf or your Kindle already. So it's called Lend Me Your Ears by Professor Max Atkinson. Secondly, the speech I'd like you to have a look at. And this is going back quite a way. This is going back to just before the Second World War, in fact. And it's a speech that was made by King George V at the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939. Now, he wasn't known as a great orator. And when you listen to this speech, and I'll supply you with a link, you'll find out that he wasn't a great orator. You remember that the 2010 film, The King's Speech, was all about him getting over a speech impediment so he could deliver a speech. And in fact, when you hear this speech, I hope you take a listen to it. It is fairly stilted. He gets through it. There are quite a few pauses in it, but it's a very, very important speech. Only 404 words long, but absolutely critical. Every single word in that speech was carefully considered and placed in that speech for maximum impact. He talks in great emphasis. He talks about why this is such an important speech and why it's such an important occasion and why he is there talking to the British people about his response, his personal response, and what's going to happen in future. It's a really powerful speech, not a great piece of oratory, but a brilliantly scripted speech. So listen very carefully to the words. That's the real King's speech, I suppose. And the third thing is the pigeon trick. I'm sure you know the pigeon trick. Yes, the pigeon trick. You remember pigeons? Once upon a time, we used to carry messages from one place to another. Before we had email, and before we had WhatsApp, and before we had all sorts of devices that we could use to send messages immediately to one another, people used to use pigeons. They used to write a little note on a piece of paper, wrap it up, pop it into a little cylinder, and attach that to a pigeon's leg, and the pigeon took the message. Now, they were tiny notes. You couldn't write very much on them. So when you sent something by pigeon post, as it used to be called, you had to be very brief. And that's what I want you to think about. If you were trying to communicate the essence of your speech to somebody far away, and the only way you could communicate was by a little note attached to a pigeon's leg, what would you write on that note? You can't do 10 bullet points. You can't do half a dozen paragraphs. You have to keep it very brief, just like the King's speech that I talked about a moment ago. So the pigeon trick is to reduce your speech to a little note, a little size of a thing that would fit round a pigeon's leg that summarizes the essential element of your speech. So you have to be brief, you have to demonstrate value, and you have to explain exactly what it is. So there are the three things for today. Lend Me Your Ears by Professor Max Atkinson, The Real King's Speech by King George V in 1939, and The Pigeon Trick. I wish you the very best of luck.